Hi, welcome to Watcher DM. I'm Gabriel. Today I am going to do a flip through and review of the game Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition by Kobayashi, as was published by the Merry Mushmen, and is an old school dark fantasy role-playing game. It's pretty similar to some retro clones in its rulings, kind of rule set, but it's got some unique innovations and some really great flavor and some awesome tools. So it's a really cool book. I'm gonna actually probably start there. Before I go any further, let me just ask if you like these videos or you like this content, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of it, subscribe, and if you want to be notified when new videos come out, you can hit the bell icon in the subscription flow. And if you want to support these or get early access to these videos, you can go join the Patreon at patreon.com/watcherdm. Of course, we also have a number of games and adventures available for lots of systems on Drive-Thru RPG, itch.io, or our website, watcherdm.com, where, of course, you can also join our mailing list and get lots of free content that we make. So, yeah, enough shilling. Let's dive into the Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition. So the book construction here is pretty unique. It is, oops, I still got my character sheet in here. Classic. It is a stitch-bound case binding. The construction is nice. Like it feels like it's gonna last for a while. It's got a kind of glossy page finish on the interior pages, so the colors are very vibrant. It's got lots of this kind of faux texturing, this kind of distressing, that adds a lot to the vibe of the book. Although personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. I find it tends to interrupt the readability. But I think in this case, it's done pretty tastefully, and is of course a Merry Mushmen kind of staple. But yeah, good book, nice heft. It feels kind of chunkier than a book its size, I think. Probably because of the weight of the pages. The art is intense. It's really, really beautiful art. And it's kind of dappled all over with these quotes and excerpts from various inspirational materials. In this case, There Is No Truth But That of Eternal Struggle, Michael Moorcock, from The Weird of the White Wolf. And then, yeah, you get into the dedications, which is a nice thank you to Eric and Olivier for helping get the book made, and then William King for his books and his foreword, and David Black for creating the Black Hack, which, of course, was the, I think, progenitor of this work. One of my favorite artists is featured in this book, so Evelyn Moreau is featured, as is Rob Matthews, whom I'm only acquainted with through this work, I think. Of course, there's also the art of Goran Gligovic, and it is written by Alexandre Kobayashi Jeanette, edited by Eric Newton and Ulrich. I'm probably mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. And then Olivier Revenu. Also probably murdering that, but obviously this was made in France, published in France, and printed in Euskadi in 2023. Made by humans, yay! The foreword is written by Bill King, or William King. And yeah, it's just kind of a little note to all of us about kind of the history of the game and how to hold on to that history and bring it into the future, which I think is really great. We've got some kind of fiction here that just talks about, how the fantasy of this game works, kind of. So it's very much an exploration-heavy principle, and it isn't trying to make you deal with dice rolling all the time. Like, it's kind of a roll when there's consequences kind of thing. Table of contents, of course, is juxtaposed against this amazing Elric art, I think. And then we dive right into the rules. The rules for this game are fairly straightforward. So it defines turns, which are pretty straightforward, although it does imply here that turns are kind of time adjustable. So if you're taking a turn shopping, that will take exactly as long as it would take you to go shopping. Versus if you're taking a turn in combat, that should take an appropriate amount of time in combat. So how long a turn takes is kind of relative to the type of action you're trying to execute. And I like the way that they describe that. I think it might be less helpful for a new DM to kind of adjudicate, but I do think that it works pretty well in this context. Also, one of the features of this game is one turn, two actions. So on your turn, you can take two actions. One of those actions might be moving, but it might be anything else. And so if you take the same action twice on your turn, there's a consequence for that. And that's kind of how they manage the action economy of the game. So the core premise of the game, like the core way of resolving things you want to do in the game, is an attribute test where you will roll a d20 and you will try and roll under your attribute score. So we'll get into character creation later and show how the attributes are done. They are not what you would expect. And then critical successes and failures. So on a 20, it is always a critical failure. On a 1, it is always a critical success. And it does say here, a critical failure means you have to roll the Doom die immediately. So the Doom die is a thing we'll get into, but it is kind of a foundational innovation of this game. And I've heard about it kind of talked about in a few other games. I don't know if this was the origin of it, but it is pretty fun. When I ran this the other night, I had a great time kind of exploring how it works. The threat level is another kind of universal concept that if you are doing something with an opponent that is of a higher level than your character, the difference in level is applied to the roll in the worst way. So you would add to the roll value. And then group tests are done basically where everybody tests, and if half the party succeeds, then it's a success. So that's how that's set up. It does import advantage and disadvantage, which is you roll 2 dice, take the best or take the worst result, and it does something here that I really like, which is just to say that advantage and disadvantage can apply to any die roll. So it kind of explicitly declares, like, you can have advantage on a damage roll, you can have advantage on a usage die. So I like that they kind of spell that out. I feel that that's been one of the misses of advantage and disadvantage in other systems. Usage die. This is one of the features, kind of one of the innovations that I think is pretty cool. Now, I've become used to usage die through my play in Realms of Peril, but I think this kind of had it first, maybe, or around the same time. And effectively, a usage die is, it's a die that you roll when you want to see if something is expended. And if it rolls a 1 or a 2, you go down a rank in die. And so die go from D20 to D12 to D10 to D8 to D6 to D4. And then it's depleted. And so, like the Doom die is a usage die. It's described here on this side. And it starts as a D6. And if you roll a 1 or a 2, it becomes a D4. And if it's depleted, you are considered doomed. And it replenishes on, when you rest or whatever on a long rest. But yeah, so that's kind of an example. But you end up using this for a bunch of different stuff. In fact, one of the cool effects of it is like poison, where like you take, you D6 damage. So you roll the you roll the D6, and if it's like a 4 or whatever, you take 4 damage. And then you'll have to roll a D6 on your next turn for the next poison damage. And if it's a 1 or a 2, you take 2 damage, whatever. And then it goes down to a D4. And so that's how the poison kind of runs out of your system and might kill you. It's just a really interesting way of of accomplishing that. It does have a kind of bit about distances and turns and distances that I think is pretty lightweight. It might be a little loosey-goosey for some DMs, but I think it does what it needs to do. Also, the declaration about perception is pretty great. It's like literally 2 sentences that are just like, if they're looking for something, they find it. If time is taken in as a factor, then use an int test, which, yeah, I think that's a good way to execute on that. The Doom die has a couple of functions. So I know I mentioned like you roll it when you have a crit fail. You can also call on Doom, which allows you to reduce the it reduces the result. So you subtract the results of the Doom die from your attribute test result, but the Doom die automatically downgrades regardless of what you roll. And then you can use it to kind of power gifts or certain abilities require it. Doom die is pretty cool. If you are doomed, if it is depleted, you have disadvantage on all rolls until it is recovered, which is pretty intense, but certainly drove some player decision making in my game. So that was fun. Combat is pretty well articulated. It's quick. It is player-facing rolls, so effectively when a PC attacks, they are going to roll a strength test to hit, usually. I guess it starts with initiative. So initiative is done using a wisdom test, and if you succeed, you go before the enemies. If you fail, you go after the enemies. So the enemies are kind of always in the middle. And then it just defines how critical success and failure work for initiative. And then on attacking, for a melee weapon, you use a strength test. On a ranged weapon, you use a dex test. And then a successful attack deals damage. You roll the damage die. On a critical success, you deal maximum damage, and you add another damage die on top of that. So max damage plus die, which is, I think it's actually a pretty standard house rule for, at least for our 5e table, that's what we use. So it's nice to see that reflected here. This art. Ooh, this art. I love it so much. Defending. Because the enemies don't roll dice, the PCs will be rolling to parry or dodge. I really, really like this. This actually creates interesting decision-making for what you're trying to do. And remember, all of these rolls are affected by the threat level. So if the opponent is, hardier or higher level than the PCs, that's how it impacts the rolls against that enemy or against dodging or parrying that enemy. So it's pretty cool. Most weapons most of the enemies will do like static damage. They just do static damage. So it'll say like 5. And then if they fail their dodge, they just take 5 damage. So it's pretty straightforward there. Again, DM doesn't need to roll any dice. Characters do d6 damage with kind of any weapon. And their unarmed damage is a d4. All this stuff can kind of change with backgrounds. And I'll get into that in a little bit later. The armor's protection rating is subtracted from incoming damage. So if you're wearing armor, it'll reduce the amount of damage you're taking. This is actually pretty hard to keep in mind, and I need to find a way, kind of a mnemonic, to like remind myself how that needs to work when running. I think I may have flubbed it when running my game recently. Shields are interesting in that they give you advantage on your defense tests when parrying. So it's kind of a cool way of treating shields, but I think it's pretty effective. And then on a crit failure, the shield is broken, which I think is a great way to handle that. Two-handed weapons give you advantage on the damage rolls, which, again, elegant way to handle that. And then there are a number of attack effects that the PCs can take. And then this talks about that ongoing damage like acid or poison or fire, and how it just uses usage die for damage, which I think is really cool. When you run out of hit points, you are considered helpless. And after the combat is done, you roll a d6, and the status here is affected on the PC. Recovery is pretty straightforward, and I don't think it really is anything too groundbreaking. Short rests allow you to recover half of your con in hit points, rounded down. And then a long rest has to be taken in a safe environment. So that's pretty nice because it prevents, like, your PCs really have to go find a safe place to rest. They rest 6 hours and they recover all their hit points, and their doom die are restored. And then, yeah, what counts as a safe environment is kind of up to the GM. But, yeah, that's kind of how that's done. And then there's a nice combat example here, which, is great. And then we get into character creation. So the basic rules have been kind of spelled out, and you're going to find some pretty familiar things here. So our normal stats from, most D&D. What I love about this, though, is character creation is described in, kind of really terse, short terms. Creating a character is a 3-step process. You roll your character's attributes, you pick an origin, and finally choose backgrounds. So, rolling your attributes, you roll 2d6, and then you use this to map. So if you roll a 2 or a 3, you put an 8. If you roll a 12, you put a 13. All the stats are between 8 and 13. So it's very flat kind of math in terms of success and failure. Origins are not what you would expect, I think. Most people probably expect the distance, origins to be like, oh, I'm a dwarf, or I'm an elf, or I'm from the desert of the sands, whatever. In this game, it's really down to how civilized are you. So barbarian origins have a d20 table of, your character was born ... Civilized origins, same thing, and then decadent origins, same thing. But you can tell it's really kind of setting up this conflict between law and chaos, and kind of where humans fit within that. And then you've got your backgrounds. You can choose any 3 backgrounds, but you can only have one of any unique background. So the Berserker is the unique barbarian background, the Inventor is the unique civilized background, and the Assassin is the unique decadent background. I don't think it says anywhere that you have to choose the unique background from your origin. Or even that you have to choose, from your origin at all. So don't really know what the correlation is there, but I think the idea is just to make an interesting character. And then once you've got your 3 backgrounds, you get your hit points, which is your con. Very easy. You start with UD6 as your doom die. It talks about your weapon and unarmed damage. And then you get your starting equipment, which usually is you start with some coin, a couple of weapons that you roll, so you'll roll for those. And it's possible for you to roll no weapons, so we'll get to that. That's on page 29. And then you've got your languages, which this is kind of wild because this definitely just is go ahead and pick some languages, and by and large your party is going to be well, I don't know what any of these things are. So this is a good opportunity for you to kind of lay down some world building, I would say. And I think we determined that Jackie's character was from the Golden Archipelago and spoke Naruan, but also was a merchant on a ship. So she was born, I think she was abandoned, or her ship crashed on the beach or something, and she was found. And so Naruan and also Thyranian as merchant league, so they knew the merchant language. Trade tongue. So that was kind of, it allowed the characters to kind of build a little bit more. Then we go into equipment. So if you need money, it's actually, at the beginning of each adventure, characters lose a number of coins equal to their con. So this represents their daily expenses between 2 adventures. If your characters couldn't or wouldn't pay, they can either have a job or loan, have taken a job or loan, roll on one of the tables below. So they can get a job or they can borrow some money, which I think is really great. Man, this art is so fun. Price lists. So this is a unique feature, again, where everything kind of has variable pricing. So you're going to roll a d6 when they want to buy something and see where it is on this table. If it's light armor, for instance, it'll be times 10 coins. So whatever you rolled times 10, that's what it costs for that thing. D6 times 100 for any of this stuff, right? So if you want medium armor, that's what you're doing. Note, you cannot get heavy armor. You cannot buy it. It has to be made or won or found, which I think is really great. There's a nice little section here on drugs and poisons. Weapons this is the weapons table I was talking about. You roll a d10. If you roll a 0 or a 10, you do not get a weapon for that roll. So you can end up with 2 weapons, or you can end up with no weapons, depending on how you roll. Armor is basically 1, 2, 3, and then your shield. So again, there's very little chance, like if you fail to dodge or if you fail to parry, your armor isn't going to save you. You're always going to take some damage. For the most part, I'm sure there's monsters in here that, and you could make monsters, of course, that have 3 or fewer damage, but wouldn't make a ton of sense. It talks about experience and advancement. This is pretty interesting stuff. So after every session, your PCs write down the title of their story. And in fact, I'm just going to pull out my character sheet here to kind of show. So stories and dark secrets is where you put those. And as you put those in, once you have enough stories that match your level, your current level, you go up in level. So, if you go to level 2, you get a +1 to an attribute. Max score is 18, and you get +1 HP. On level 3, you gain a gift, and so you can get a gift from one of these, depending on how your character is aligned to balance, chaos, or law. And then we get into the weird shit, the weird stuff. So dark pacts and other vileness. So it does say kind of to use this responsibly and like only introduce, maybe 1 or 2 of these into your game. And I would say that's really good advice. We ran a 1-shot, so I wasn't super worried about it. And I think somebody went and loaded up on all of these. It didn't really have an enormous effect on anything. I mean, it was fun, but, and yeah, you demonic powers. So invoke some demonic powers, create a new pact, freeform demonism. You get names here. All the tools you need for some nice, nasty demon stuff. Spirit alliances. Ally yourself with different spirits. I think we had the wind spirits come and like take the party around. They were kind of like transportation in our adventure, which I'll be showing in another video. I'll be doing a flip-through review of that. And you got sorcery. This is like normal spell casting. I think this all requires like an int check. I think this one is Doom Die, and I'm pretty sure this one is also Doom Die. You just use it, and your Doom Die is what you use as kind of your resource for casting. So yeah, and then there's a bunch of spells here, so some really great fun spells. The power level of these spells is all over the place. Some of them are basically useless, and some of them are like overpowered as hell. I don't think that the game was designed with balance in mind, and I think that's great. I think it's just honestly awesome, especially since you kind of randomly roll your spells. I think that works perfectly. Finding and learning new spells is described here. And then there's some fairy ties. So these are things you can get from being in compact with Fae. Twisted Science, this is technology stuff, so you can have inventions, and you can create different inventions with different amounts of points, and those points also cost you coin. I think there's like a 20 coin worth of materials per invention point required, so you can make some of this stuff using inventions. Runic weapons are kind of magic weapons, and they're very powerful. They're kind of what I would consider like kind of they're like the magic kind of artifact swords of the setting, but it's got a great kind of, or weapons, I guess. It's all kinds of different weapons. It's got a great kind of creator set of tables here that are very fun. We did not use these, but I hope to soon. And then we go into the Bestiary. Now, this little table of Bestiaries here is awesome because I'm going to use these for my Ultraviolet Grasslands pretty much when I run Black Sword Hack with Ultraviolet Grasslands, which is my next hope. But yeah, you can see straight here, right? Like a level 1 enemy does 4 damage. It has 5 hit points. Pretty straightforward. If you want to make an enemy, that's a great place to start. And then it gives you some different stat blocks for enemies. And again, very straightforward. The level tells you their hit points and your expectation in terms of damage. And then it'll give you like special abilities and stuff. So Acid Spit, Dex to avoid basically. So you have to dodge it. Destroys a point of armor or inflicts 10 damage to an unarmored opponent. Which is great. Yeah, Desiccated Dragon. There's some great enemies in here. I think it's really well Very, very spicy. Very, very fun. They break them down sometimes into some kind of sub categories of some of these things. So, like mercenaries, you've got your archers, hired blades, captains. That's great. It's very well organized and lots of fun. You've got a nice little "what do I find on the corpse" table, which is great. And then this is by far the best part of the book. It is creating your own world. So this, from here on, the book is about creating a world in this kind of dying earth tradition. And it is awesome. Just rolling on these tables and coming up with cool stuff and kind of stitching it together and making it your own is amazing. It does not assume that the villain in the world or the antagonist of the adventure campaign is chaotic. It definitely gives you a way of dealing with both chaos or law, and then it talks about the struggle and how the world is ending. So it's that all very fun, very evocative stuff. And then you get some regional adventure seeds. So these are things you can use to kind of kick off some adventures for the different areas. And I guess I probably should have called out how it works is you set up a blank map and you just note the names of each places you see fit of these different places. Now, of course, you can make up your own list of places. You can make up your own tables of these. But, like, I think this is great, starting point for making a cool world. Last city of a dying species, the city of thieves, the theocracy, the dust empire, right? Like, great names and great ideas in here. And then what about balance? So balance is generally considered kind of a hidden, like out of the way part, or like a group of people who are kind of resistant to, either side having too much power. And so they kind of get this little section here about how they're, where the balance stronghold is, but it should be considered like not a major player in the world. And then the end game talks about how a campaign can kind of be brought to resolution in the end game. And then we've got a section on creating your city. So this will be the city that your PCs will probably start in if you're doing like a campaign, which is great. We didn't end up using that, of course, so we ran a one-shot. And then Traveler's Tales. So these can inspire events that your PCs can encounter during their travels, which again, super fun way to generate some adventure stuff. And then we go into the adventures in the book. So there are a number of adventures in this book. Dark Seeds is the first one. The maps tend to be pretty abstract, which I think is good. Not all of these adventures, would I say, are great in terms of support. In fact, they can be a little oblique, but your mileage may vary. I think it depends on what you're looking for. But I would say, by and large, these are expecting the DM to do the heavy lifting. You will want to read these thoroughly. You will want to prep some extra stuff. You will want to make the stitching work together to kind of make these adventures work. The Slayers of the Blood God, I think, is especially hard to figure out how this works. Like, it tells you everything that's here, but it's not necessarily clear how that would work as an adventure. So I think you'll want to kind of maybe write some little interludes to kind of set things up and deal with how the party's gonna interact with the place. Again, these are terse, right? These are super punchy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages for an adventure. So yeah, expect that kind of thing. And then this is A City to Burn, which is a port of the north. So this is a kind of city generated. And then we go into the appendices, which has a bunch of helpful tips on running the game. Read these, they're great. Advice from the great old ones. So these are just bits of kind of quotes and stuff and learnings from some of the ideas from some of the inspirational writers who promulgated this type of work. And then the Black Sword Hack for Lone Adventurers. So it does have kind of a tool belt here for doing kind of solo play. Or maybe even better said, like prep as play. It's good. This is great stuff. And then it goes into a bibliography. Again, the inspiration stuff. And your favorite sword and sorcery book is a plot generator, so it's just talks about how to swipe that stuff. You get some great covers from some very fun books. And then we got the Dark God Oracle, or Dark God's Oracle, which can be used to kind of generate results within the game. Cosmic usage dice is another way of doing usage dice that kind of affects how law and chaos are interacting over time in a campaign. I fully intend to use that when I run my Black Sword Hack campaign. Friendly NPCs in combat, the Allies Oracle. This is kind of a way of introducing hirelings and NPCs or allies and giving them some kind of random action basically, or resolving what they would do. This is the section where Evelyn Moreau broke down and kind of created a world. I really like everything that she did here. I think it's really, really great. And then, yeah, appendix-n is impossible creatures. So this is just a lot of really weird, it's a creature generator. And then strange planes, appendix-11 is like random transdimensional or multidimensional places. Names by origin, so this can be a great way of generating names for characters. And then you've got your character sheets in kind of small format, micro format, and then A5 format. And then a glossary of terms. A beautiful sword here with a link to the resource document, so the systems reference document. This is a CC4 attribution document, so if you want to use any of the text from this book, just attribute, and you can make your own Black Sword hack if you want to. One thing I did for my players when I was setting this game up is, of course, I have a printer that allows me to print A5, and I got some A5 cardstock, so I made some nice character sheets for them based on this here. But because I wanted them to have access to the rules, I did also make a kind of quick reference sheet that I then printed on the back of the character sheet. So I'll make this available. There'll be a link down in the video description about where you can download this, probably on itch. But yeah, that is my flip-through review of the Black Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition Old School Dark Fantasy by the Merry Mushmen, a game by Kobayashi. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.